Today, we discuss Miro. Today, I want to talk about the hellscape that is technical diagramming, right? Everybody's nodding their heads right now, And there is a potential solution that I want to share. There was one name that several people brought up. I did some digging, and it's kind of nuts how much this program Miro has for developers. I have to share this. It could potentially be a game changer for you. So my favorite part about Miro is that half the work is already done. Like right now, typically we spend hours starting diagrams from scratch, gathering information. You get buy-in from every team. That's a lot of work to do. But Miro has a full set of integrations with the tools you're probably already using. And they also offer open APIs and SDKs for custom solutions for all those niche diagramming use cases we have to do, right? So the end result is the same, but it doesn't take forever. It's a massive, massive time saver. I'm transforming basic flowcharts and network architectures, and it all lives in one place. So are you using Miro? Have you used it? I want to hear. That's MIRO.com.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, an infant formula company on a mission to get a lot closer to the most superfood on the planet, breast milk. Our patented protein blend has more of the important and most abundant proteins actually found in breast milk. We're the first and only U.S.-made formula to use organic, grass-fed whole milk, not skim. We even conducted the largest clinical trial by a new infant formula company in a quarter century, with clinically proven benefits like easier digestion, less spit up, and softer poops versus a leading infant formula. And we make our own formula in the USA and our very own factories in Iowa, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Canadian voice coaches we talked about before were probably involved in the show, but Klingon sounds a bit like those noises your stomach makes when you're hungry, you know?
Right, and this one is definitely been a guttural.
So, hey, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of Spotcast, the podcast about Star Trek Discovery and other things that we find interesting in the sci-fi world. My name is Tim Mitra. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined by Jaime Lopez in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
All right. So, actually, speaking of fact-checking and misspoking and whatever, I was listening to the show the other day, and somehow I missed that I was talking about the For All Mankind Blu-ray set that I got, the Criterion collection of. And that was the one where they went and took the NASA film and thawed it out and did the frame-by-frame scanning and reassembled the film that way. But I had said the DVD. The DVD is still a good movie, but it's not in the way we were talking about the reproduction or the restoration, if you will, of the Star Treks, the new generation, the next generation and the original series. The colors are deeper, richer, and all that kind of stuff because they went back to the original source and scanned them, as opposed to just taking what was on theater quality film and then going to VHS and then going to DVD, right? But the Blu-ray, they made a better transition. So that was just a bit of follow-up. But speaking of that, so for those of you who are listening to the show, Jonathan Kuline, our fact checker, who's the expert in all things sci-fi and convention-wise, whatever, has done a couple of follow-up sets of information for us. Some of the things we said wrong. So on episode 1, Fezzes are cool. So just some quick follow-ups here from Jonathan, and you can follow him on Twitter at JPK News. But so he mentioned that there were 5 original Planet of the Apes movies, not 4, as Jaime said.
Ooh, that's a good one, because I was not 100% certain. I was pretty certain, but yeah.
Well, there's the Planet of the Apes. There's Beneath the Planet of the Apes. There's a second one. There's Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and Battle of the Planet of the Apes. I think. Yeah. I'm not sure about the last one. Jonathan can correct me on that one. But yeah, and that was the order in which I think they were released, right? So the Planet of the Apes TV show ran for only 14 episodes in 1974, but they must have rerun it forever, Jonathan. That's why I remember seeing it. Battlestar Galactica, which we mentioned, premiered in 1978 between Star Wars, as after Star Wars, but before Star Trek, surprisingly, the motion picture. I just remember, sci-fi movies are really boring before, like you really had to be a sci-fi nerd to watch sci-fi movies before Star Wars came out and sort of, tilt, with the ILM, with the practical effects with the motion control cameras, right? Mm-hmm. Zooming in on the models, right? So, and then the TV show came on afterwards. Only lasted for 10 episodes, really. Interesting. I thought there was more than that. Lauren Green, who I mentioned Lauren Green, was Pride of Ottawa, Canada, was Ben Cartwright on Bonanza in 1959 to 1973, and before starring in Battlestar Galactica. And of course, I said this wrong. Patrick Stewart played Professor Charles Xavier in the X-Men film franchise, not Dr. X, as I said. You want to read some of these?
I missed that one. That one went completely by me. I didn't even notice that one.
Yeah, I think I said Dr. X. Yeah, it was me. I said Dr. X. Yeah. So, do you want to pick up from 1629 there?
Let's see. So, Patricia Quinn, who played Magenta, and Nell Campbell, who played Columbia in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, were guests at Fan Expo Canada 2017. A little bit of local flavor there for the Canadians.
Yeah, I couldn't remember Columbia's name. That was what the issue was. Yeah, being a huge, Rocky Horror Picture Show, I couldn't even remember the main character's name. Carry on.
Yeah. Let's see here. At 1728, a head sketch of the title character from The Savage Dragon by Image Comics co-founder Eric Larson cost $60, worth every penny. Which, I remember Savage Dragon being pretty cool, and Image Comics was the hotness around that time.
That was the illustration that I said Jonathan goes around with his big sketchbook and gets people to illustrate stuff. So he had Eric Larson draw him a copy of Savage Dragon.
Cool. Let's see here. Oh, this is related to Lurch on this one, right?
Mr. Hom.
Mr. Hom was Lwaxana Troy's valet in Star Trek The Next Generation. He's played by 7-foot-tall Dutch actor Karel Strijken. I don't know how that's
Strijken. I would say Strijken, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we mentioned him, but not quite. We just kept calling him Lurch. Anyway.
Lurch and other Lurch. At 1915, the guy who played Jaws in the James Bond films, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker was Richard Keel, who died in 2014 at age 74. Oh, he lived pretty long for a guy that big. Normally, folks that large tend to have sadly a shorter lifespan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jason Mewes was a guest at Fan Expo 2017, but Kevin Smith did not make it this year, which is, I think I mentioned that he comes every year, or tries to come every year as well. Mm-hmm. Star Trek Discovery, which is, of course, what this show was supposed to be about, is set roughly 10 years before the events of the original series, or 10 years before the events of the original Star Trek TV show, which I think we had mentioned, right?
We were fuzzy on that one. It was sort of like, well, I vaguely remember, but the premiere gives a specific date right at the very beginning.
Right. The Klingons were in Star Trek Enterprise. In fact, the Klingon is the first character you see in the pilot episode, strangely enough. Of course, I made the mistake of saying that the protagonist is the hero in a story and the antagonist is a villain in the story. That explains why I almost failed grade 12 English.
That's pretty key for English lit, for sure.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I had to plead my case because my teacher was going to fail me, and I went to her and I said, I'm going to go to university. So if you fail me in English in this course, it's going to severely impair my ability to go and study in post-secondary, right? So I think she begrudgingly gave me 52 or something like that, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wasn't reading at the time. I didn't learn to read until I was in university, actually, which is, I guess, it's a common problem. But we were able to skate through high school, with certain skills and charm and that kind of stuff, and I managed to do that and not study English properly, which was regrettable because by the time I did learn to read in university, it made quite a difference. Anyway, so I never did tell the story about the baseball bat in barbed wire. So Jonathan says everybody should tweet me and remind me about it. So what I was talking about was when I came in to Fan Expo, I came in a sort of side entrance which I'd never been in before because we've always just gone and bought our tickets on the day, but I had bought mine in advance, and so I was led into the north end of the building since I had pre-purchased my ticket. And they do a weapons check, for the cosplayers, right, to make sure you're not really walking through with an actual samurai sword or things like that. And I can tell you, those places get pretty crowded. I don't know if you've been to the conventions, but you get these people walking around with these giant costumes, and you get whacked in the head. All kinds of things can happen. Poked in the eye with arrows, and whatever. But people had actually, so Lucille is a character from The Walking Dead, so hopefully this is not a spoiler if you're not watched The Walking Dead, but the character Negan carries a baseball bat that has wrapped around it barbed wire, and people came to the convention with actual baseball bats with actual barbed wire wrapped around them, and they were confiscated and sitting on a table as I walked by, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my story about the baseball bats, right? So
anyway, that's a rough one. I don't know what cosplayers normally should do in that case. I assume there must be something.
Buy the rubber bat. There were tons of rubber bats, of rubber Lucille's, right?
Oh, really? So like with rubber barbed wire.
Rubber barbed wire. Yeah, okay. Yeah. They were selling those all over the convention, and people were buying. But it's I think it's funny that they would do that, right? So, just got a message from John. He's just done all three episodes. So let's finish this one off, and then we'll go back into the follow up. So, so spoiler warning again. Have you seen the finale of The Walking Dead yet? The last season, just before, which starts up again in October.
I haven't, but it's okay for me. I don't know about other folks listening on the show.
Again, spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the last episodes, you maybe skip ahead a minute or two. But Sonequa Martin Green's character in The Walking Dead, Sasha, actually killed herself rather than being used as a pawn by Negan and his gang of friends. Which, so I think I might have said she got killed by Negan, but it was the other way around. She decided to, rather than have him manipulate her, killed herself when she was locked up in the closet. So spoiler warning off. The actor who played Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter films is in fact Tom Felton, and he's also in the past season of The Flash, a show which I stopped watching a while ago. So do you watch The Flash on TV, Jaime?
I never got into The Flash or Arrow or what is it, Guardians of Tomorrow. So the times I have seen those shows is when they've crossed over with Supergirl, which I actually do watch, and I've enjoyed those crossover episodes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I haven't gone back and watched the Flash versions of those, but yeah, I watched the first season for a while, but then I kind of got bored with the story. But then I'm old. The most recent Marvel movie that Tim actually saw was Spider-Man: Homecoming. He knows this. Jonathan knows this because he was sitting next to me, and it was a double bill where we went and watched Baby Driver right after that. So the weird dog in the Inhumans is in fact named Lockjaw, and he's a good boy, as Jonathan says. This one's for you, actually. 5032. You want to read that?
Yeah, no, I'm so interested in this one. So Lexa Doig, Toronto native, is currently starring as Talia Al Ghul on Arrow, which makes me feel like, oh, maybe I should go watch those episodes then, since I still have this irrational teenage crush on Lexa Doig. So
what was the reference to her? I don't remember that.
She came out on, where I first saw her was on Andromeda, the Kevin Sorbo space adventure. She was the AI for the ship.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And then she also played a villain whose name we're going to have to fact check because I don't remember. She played a villain on Continuum.
Oh, like one of the people who were part of the bad group of people.
Yeah, the terrorists. I think it's fine to call them terrorists, right? Or freedom fighters.
Was she the blonde woman? Was she the blonde one or dark-haired woman on Continuum?
I can't remember what hair color she had. I remember it being maybe brownish, blackish. I don't remember it being blonde on that one.
Like a punk cut or was
like
she tough,
like a bob cut. She was
the
girlfriend of the main terrorist. I don't want to give too many spoilers for Continuum, but the main terrorist guy who goes with them.
Now, who's the star of Continuum? What's her name?
I have no idea. I assume she's Canadian too, so she probably gives out a lot of other things over there.
No. Oh man, we gotta look up her name. But anyway, what I was going to ask you about it. Did you know she was the Green Lady in the J.J. Abrams reboot of Star Trek?
I didn't know that. I didn't recognize.
Yeah, I think maybe it's actually the second Star Trek movie where Kirk is in, and I think Uhura's. Yeah, he was dating her, and Uhura was her roommate. That's in the first movie, right?
I believe that's in the first one. Yes.
Yeah, and he has to hide underneath the bed. That girl is the Green Lady from, forgetting, Jonathan, help us out with the name of the planet. From Slave Girl. She plays. They had a Slave Girl character in the original Cage movie, right? Or Cage,
like the episode. Orion. They're from the planet Orion.
Slave Girl?
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, so she I think she plays that character there. But yeah, the star of Continuum, which we should be ashamed for not remembering. Anyway, moving on. Star Trek Next Generation premiered premiered on September 28th, 1987. That gives me a point of reference now because I'm trying to remember where the hell I was when I know where I was sitting. I remember what room I was in when I was watching it. But so you would have been what, 3, Jaime?
No, I would have been 6 at that time.
6,
and
okay.
I do remember being around that age and having some sort of trip to, I assume it was like Toys R Us or some other toy store where we got the little die-cast model of the Starship Enterprise and the terrible action figures that are nowhere near as good as the ones you see on the shelves today.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And Sean Ashmore, pride of Richmond, BC, played Bobby, Iceman Drake in the X-Men film series, and his love interest, another Canadian who played Rogue, Oscar winner Anna Paquin. She's the pride of Winnipeg, Manitoba. There you go.
Yeah.
Same as Randy Bachman and Neil Young. Small world. All right. We'll come back to fact-checking either tonight or next week. All right, so we have some follow-up items. I posted a video that I found on Alicia Vikander playing Tomb Raider, talking about the making of Tomb Raider or how she became Lara Croft in the story. Talks about her, wire work and her, other people talk about her, her workout and how she, really got into the character and kind of stuff. So it's kind of really action-packed, look at some of her work as playing Lara Croft in Tomb Raider. And as well, we mentioned that Alicia Vikander had won Best Supporting Actress Academy Award for The Danish Girl, which was a different movie altogether than Ex Machina, right?
Definitely. I've not seen that one, but that also has, I forget his name, but he was in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and he was also...
Yes, that guy, yeah.
Also for fact-checking, he was also Stephen Hawking in whatever the name of that movie was about Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, exactly. Life. Yeah. Now we have to look him up. Hang on.
Now I'm like, and he's almost certainly Canadian because he's been in everything. And
no, he's British.
All over the place.
He's British. Eddie Redmayne. I didn't even have to look it up. See, that's how good I am. Eddie Redmayne. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's been in quite a few things. I'm trying to remember what's the first thing I saw him in. It wasn't the Stephen Hawking one. It was something else. Oh well, yeah. But he's quite good. So yeah, and we've been talking a bit about dark matter. We even mentioned it on the More Than Just Code podcast last week, really briefly. We'll have to follow up with Mark on that one. So yeah, here's a post by the showrunner. I believe he's showrunner Joseph Mizzolli. I found this on Twitter. He's posted a few things today, actually, or recently. But yeah, I think there actually is, I believe, by the time this show comes out, it'll be over. But on the 29th, which is the Friday, the fans of the show are planning on doing an event where, they can post a picture or selfie of yourself with some sort of dark matter kind of reference and send it into the studio and say, hey, we need you to bring us back for season 4. So there's a fan insurgence going on right now. But you were talking last week about how hopefully they don't break down the sets and all that kind of stuff, right? So he's posted a story here on his blog called A Final Spin. His blog is called Joseph Mizzolli's weblog. On 26th, he basically posted a series of pictures of them taking apart the sets, in fact. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a bummer because my contention in that, or my proposal in that episode was if they don't have to break down the sets, it becomes less of an obstacle towards, who can possibly bring this back, right? I think now that they have started taking apart the sets, I don't think the original network is going to go through the expense of bringing it back. I think now you're looking at a big player like a Netflix, like an Amazon to say, all right, we have the money and we can have a huge PR moment of like, look how we saved this fan beloved thing, right? Like, because they have enough money to fund it through their other mechanisms, as opposed to the original studio who now is probably using that space for other things or will very shortly. So bummer, but I think that, there's still hope, right? As long as fans keep pushing for it, I think there's still a potential for opportunity for somebody to pick it up. Just it will be a little bit more expensive for them to do so. So that is the caveat to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, well, and so you haven't seen the last series or the last season 3, right?
No, because I've only seen like 1 or 2 episodes.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So you still got that to look forward to. But yeah, unfortunately, it does end. I think I mentioned last week, it ends on a cliffhanger, kind of, a pivotal point where you kind of want to go, okay, what's going to happen next? And it's funny. I always imagine that when they do cliffhanger kind of scenes that they would go and continue to film the next bit of stuff in the series for continuity. You know what I mean? Like, so that the actors are all standing in the same position. Last episode ends and that kind of stuff, right? But sometimes I guess they don't. I guess they just go back and reset it, and the art directors and the continuity directors make sure that the cigarette is burning at the right amount, and the beer the beer is at the right amount of liquid in the glass, and that kind of stuff, right? So things that drive me nuts, by the way, when I watch movies and you go back and forth and hair is out of place between different takes and stuff like that. but People are quite good about that these days. All right. So, like one more thing here. So I mentioned Blade Runner last week. So I, mentioned I'm a true Blade Runner fan. So the moment tickets went on sale, I managed to purchase a couple of tickets for myself and Jonathan, our fact checker. And we'll be going to see Blade Runner on Thursday night when it opens on Friday officially, quote unquote, air quotes here. If you're listening to this show just now, I would just definitely go online, check your theater listings. It's playing in IMAX in most places, but I'm actually seeing it in a different thing called UMX, I think, because the theater that I'm going to go see it at doesn't have an IMAX screen. They have like it's the same sort of deal. It's a big giant screen with 3D glasses and the whole bit, right? And do they have these? They have these zones where you sit in the chairs and the chairs all kind of vibrate and stuff like that during the movie. Do they have those in the States where you are? They
do, but I don't know where the closest one of those is. I think they're branded as something like 5D or 4D or something. Where it's they call them beyond 3D. It's also got misters and like the seat rumbles through your chair and maybe the chairs move themselves a little bit.
Right.
In tune to the movie.
Atmosphere 3D is one that I've heard one name, but they call them D-box here, right? The big letter D, right?
Yeah, I don't
D-box. I just think of that as a douche box,
I don't know what the actual branding is here because I've never been to one of those here, and I wouldn't be surprised if, much like IMAX, which is a trademark, for lack of a better term,
it is, yeah.
Like there are other IMAX competitors that build to the same, roughly at least the same specifications. I don't know if they're exactly the same, but they're very close. And there'll be other sort of like off-brand competitor IMAX things. So
like I said, we have Ultramax at some of our theaters here. But okay, here's a little point of fact for you. Did you know that IMAX was a Canadian invention?
I didn't know that. Mm-mm.
I can hear you saying, "Here we go again," right?
That one's actually a little bit. Well, I take it back. I was about to say it's kind of surprising, but it actually really shouldn't be because of how much of the film industry, both television and movies, has gone to Canada.
Yeah, well, I know this. I don't know that for a fact, but Jonathan, one of Jonathan's good friends, growing up, his father worked for IMAX in Toronto or in Oakville, I guess. Let's see what it says here on the old Wikipedia. I'm pretty sure it's a Canadian invention. Well, the first place it ever appeared was at our Cinesphere at Ontario place, I thought. So I'm not just making sure on my fact checking here. 1929, they're talking about what? 1929? No way. Oh, 70 millimeter premiered in. So what it is, I don't know if you know about this, but I believe what IMAX is that instead of running the film through the projector horizontally, it runs vertically. Sorry, it doesn't run vertically; it runs horizontally. So they use the same size film, the 70 millimeter film. But instead of being 70 millimeter wide, it's 70 millimeter tall. You follow me?
Yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it says here, Tire Child, first IMAX film demonstrated at Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan. But its first permanent installation was Cinesphere here in Ontario Place, and they just opened up Ontario Place, reopened it recently. So, there was an IMAX theater in operation at Expo 67 as well. That's in Montreal. Jonathan, help us out. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it says right here. IMAX is a 70 millimeter film format set in cinema production standards developed in Canada in the late 1960s and early 70s by Graham Ferguson, Roman Coiter, Robert Kerr, and William C. Shaw. There you go. All right. And of course, the more area of the actual film you use, the better, the more high quality the images, and so you can project it larger. That was the whole deal. Okay. You come here to learn about film and production, TV production, don't you? Isn't that why people listen to this podcast?
You get a little bit of behind the scenes, and it makes sense given the Canadian background, and Canada is definitely a big player in the industry.
Yeah, and I practically have bought the entire. I'm sure I'm one of many people who've paid for the entire film industry over the years, or so it seems that way anyway. So, do you want to go back and do some more facts, or should we jump into the main part of the show?
Let's go ahead and jump into the main part of the show. I'm looking at the time here when the next thing will start.
Sure.
So, mm-hmm.
Oh, that's true. We got to get going here. All right, so this was the week. This was the week that Star Trek Discovery came out. So first question I have before we jump in. So I'm watching it on Space TV here in Toronto, and I noticed yesterday they rebroadcasted 2 episodes, episode 1 and episode 2, which took Jaime by surprise. He didn't realize we were getting 2 for 1 deal here because it's a 2-hour premiere. But so if you're streaming it on CBS, can you stream it anytime you want now, these 2 episodes, or or do you have to do it at certain times?
Now you can, and I actually don't know if you could when, what was it, 8 p.m. local time here in the Pacific time. I actually don't know because I just went ahead and started watching the first episode, and I didn't even pay attention as to whether the second episode was available then. I noticed it was available as soon as I was done with the first, but that doesn't mean it wasn't always there. So you can view it like now as many times as you want. I've gone back and rewatched a couple scenes just to clarify a couple things for today's notes.
Yeah. I should have done that too myself. I apologize that I didn't. But so you didn't have to. Did you have to? Was it like you had to wait till 8 o'clock before you could stream it, or you could have watched it any time during the day? Like because here we're waiting for it to be broadcast on television, and I think I mentioned to you on Slack that it was like I think it was almost 20 minutes delayed, but it was delayed because of a live football broadcast apparently. So a game went into overtime that they weren't anticipating. But so were you able to stream it like live with the rest of us, or how about that?
So I don't believe it was available. Well, actually, you know what? I take it back. I didn't even check because it would have been 5 p.m. local time.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was your 8 p.m. Eastern is when it came out.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't watch live then.
8:30 actually. 8:30.
Okay. So then that kind of explains things. So I'm speculating here. This is a fact. I'm guessing they probably made it available on CBS All Access as soon as it became available on the East Coast, which means when I went in to go check and view locally, it probably was available.
So are you watching it on your computer, or do you watch it on like a device connected to your TV?
Device connected to TV, in this case a Roku. So I downloaded the CBS All Access channel. Of course, I plunked down my $6 per month, and and away we go.
So is that available on Apple TV as well as the other things, or only on Roku?
I'm pretty sure it's available on all the platforms. I'd be shocked if it wasn't on Apple TV and Amazon Fire TV. Right. Probably also on the Chromecast as well from Google.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the Vulcan. Hello. What did you think? Spoilers, by the way, if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, let's make that real clear that for this podcast, when we're talking about Star Trek Discovery, which is kind of like the main thrust of the episodes, and as long as Discovery is on the air, I think it'll be a real major thing going forward. It's a huge spoiler warning for the rest of this episode regarding Discovery at the very least. Yeah. I thought it was interesting in that one, this is a little bit different from your experience. So here in the United States, they broadcast on CBS, the broadcast channel for the first episode. And then if you wanted to watch the second episode, you had to go to CBS All Access.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. In my case, that there was no difference because I didn't watch it on TV or on broadcast TV. I watched it via the CBS All Access channel on my Roku. I would really view this as 1 2-hour premiere, even though it's separated into 2 episodes. And yes, there is a cliffhanger at the end of the first episode. It's really the same episode, right? It's not like it would concretely fit as, this is just a singular episode in just about any other circumstance. It's really part of the same story in that case. It's not like episodic shows that might have things completely bottled up. Like Star Trek: The Next Generation is probably a really good example in this area, where in general, unless it was a specific 2-parter episode, each episode was fully contained, right? They might talk a little bit about things that happen in other episodes, but generally not too much. Generally, things were largely reset from episode to episode. You could watch them in any order. That's not at all the case here. Like, this is, like, if you watch this episode out of order with episode 2, you won't really understand what's going on.
Right, yeah. I think I mentioned it's like a big, long 10-hour movie or whatever it's going to be, right? So
yeah, and I think there'll be, like, chapter breaks and so on and so forth, and probably smaller subplots throughout the overall arching plot of the series and the overall arching plot of this season. But episode 1, the Vulcan Hello, and episode 2, Battle at the Binary Stars, like, those are really clearly like 2 halves of the same 2-hour premiere.
Right, yeah. So what did you think about the overall show in terms of, like, hooks and things like that? I did hear the sound, the klaxon sound that you sort of hear when the computers are thinking on the original series. I heard some of those sounds while my Roomba was running around on the floor cleaning the floor, but surprisingly, but sorry, I'm watching the new Star Trek while my Roomba is cleaning my carpet. But anyway, what did you think about the sort of tie-ins to the other series that were out there? Like, what did you notice about the show?
So you're talking about tie-ins, like, where they hinted at things that are going to come up later in
sounds
Star Trek
or characters, or locations they may have mentioned and that kind of stuff, right? This is a different set of Klingons in a sense, right? This is supposedly the first time they met the Klingons, I believe, right?
Not quite. It's more like they mentioned that they hadn't had serious contact with the Klingons in a long time. Like they've had skirmishes of some sort, and that plays into Michael Burnham's backstory. But it's essentially been like, we don't have diplomatic relations with this nation, for lack of a better term, this empire for the past 100 years. So, and that plays into the first part of the show where they're like not even sure what it is they're looking at.
This is after Enterprise, right? Like after Star Trek Enterprise, but before the original series.
That's right.
Okay. Just trying to get my star dates mapped out. There was no sort of captain's log either. Very strange. But so what did you think about the sort of introduction of this? I mean, we like it, I want to get into After Trek. I don't know if you watched After Trek as well. I don't know, or if that's available to you.
It is available. I didn't have a chance to watch it, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I need to catch up on the After Trek. It's kind of like
it was interesting.
Like Talking Bad for Breaking Bad, or Talking Dead for The Walking Dead. Is it that kind of show?
Yeah. Yes, but definitely. What's his name? Kevin, or what's the name of Chris Hardwick? Right. This is the guy who hosts this show is nowhere near Chris Hardwick. He's a completely different kind of guy, like almost borderline annoying. Yeah. Anyway, just let's get back to the show. We'll talk about the After Trek afterwards.
Well, okay. So for me, again, we mentioned spoilers. It's interesting in that these first two episodes are essentially like a prologue to the rest of the series, and that's kind of a very different and kind of a weird place for them to start. Where things are different in general. Like you mentioned, there's no captain's log. It's like, well, yeah, because the captain is not the main character in this show. It's the first officer, Michael Burnham. And spoilers again for the very tail end of this two-parter. We really only meet a handful of the main characters that we're going to continue with. Michael Burnham and the space officer Saru. I forget his designation. I think it was like Lieutenant Commander or something. They make it.
He's the science officer.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess Sarek as well, right? Like those people make it through to the next part. A handful of minor characters as well, but it's a little bit different in terms of most Star Trek pilots in that we haven't really gotten to know the crew that we're going to deal with, right? So I think as we go through the other episodes that remain in the season, we'll actually see more of that coming together and understanding of who is who in the zoo for this crew, as opposed to like Encounter at Farpoint, right? Is a perfect example where like they explicitly show you every character and then meet them. Deep Space Nine do the same thing, explicitly meet each character and see how they're going on. Voyager, same thing. In this case, we kind of start in the middle of things where this crew has known each other for some time, and it shows, right, in the conversations between Saru and the captain and Michael Burnham. The captain, of course, played by Michelle Yeoh. She's Philippa Georgiou. I forget how they pronounce that name.
They don't say her first name here, just Captain Giorgio.
Right. And so
Giorgio.
So the basic premise that we're brought into is, Michael Burnham has been basically orphaned by a Klingon attack and has become a ward of Sarek. They don't really explain how or why. It's just sort of shown in a flashback that, hey, she, was studying in a Vulcan school, and Sarek has sort of like a fatherly figure to her. And at some point, after she's gotten old enough and dealt with their Vulcan equivalent of Starfleet Academy, right? They have like an expeditionary kind of sort of thing that she's brought on board in what seems to be something kind of like a cultural exchange program where, hey, do me this favor. Sure would love to have my ward, Michael, come on board. And it seemed like Captain Giorgio and Sarek seemed to have some sort of past before where they had some sort of respect.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take on this officer and sort of, guide them under my wing sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that Michelle Yeoh's character has an unfortunate experience. Let's just say it, leave it at that. But I think a lot of the stories are told through flashbacks. Like the very first part of it, I think, the first part is not a flashback, but her story with Sarek is very much a flashback kind of story, except for one point where he exchanged, is it Katra they exchanged by doing the Vulcan mind meld? So part of him becomes part of her. So at some point she's able to channel him and get advice from Sarek. But I think that we're going to see, like, Michelle Yeoh is going to be in like flashback stories because our character Michael Burnham is going to move on to new experiences and going forward in the episodes, right? Obviously, a huge altering one that's going to be in the next episode, which I saw a bit of a preview for in the After Trek show. So I don't know. I kind of see it was all over the place. What was really strange for me about Star Trek, and I probably made this huge mistake, was on the Space Channel for the 2 days leading up to Star Trek, to the Discovery, they played every single Star Trek movie, right? So they started with, the Star Trek, the movie, and they, went through all the sort of Kirk and Spock and McCoy movies, right up to Generations, where the Next Generation crosses over and Kirk and Picard work together to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. And then we get to, so Undiscovered Country. I missed it this time. That's one of my favorite movies. Search for Spock, obviously. I like Generations. I don't know where it fits into the canon of odd versus even, off the top of my head. But I like First Contact. That's one of my favorite movies too. And again, like I think I mentioned that I had missed the whole Locutus. I mean, I'd seen Locutus of Borg episodes of the Next Generation after they were broadcast, like in reruns or whatever, but I'd never saw it at the time. So when I saw First Contact, I had no frame of reference for Locutus, all the way up to and including the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. So from what that did to me, though, because I had, and I was working on other things, I wasn't just watching these movies. I was working on coding and doing my other daily chores, but I had the movies on in the background while I'm doing that, right? What it did to me, though, is I got sort of inundated with Star Trek look and feel and sounds, right? So, and I also had watched I actually watched part of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. It was on another channel too, as well, the second or third movie. But so by the time I got to the new Discovery show, it didn't seem new to me. Like I wasn't like, oh, this is a new, fresh retelling. It's from a visual look and feel kind of point of view. It had the same kind of J.J. Abrams lens flare that I was joking about a couple of weeks ago. It had the same sort of dark sets that they've had in the last, series of movies, and including the J.J. Abrams one. Mind you, the J.J. Abrams bridge is very bright and brightly lit, right? But this was very dark. This particular starship that they were on. What was the name of the starship they were on? I mean, there's your quiz for the day. I'm
probably going to butcher this pronunciation, but I did listen to how Michelle Yeoh pronounces it, because seeing as it appears to be a Chinese name, I think it's named after a historical Chinese spacecraft, like a real life spacecraft, just like we were talking about Discovery and Columbia for the NASA space shuttles. Right. I think it's the Shenzhou or Shenzhou, if you want to anglicize it a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it means lucky ship or something like that. Or I read something about that actually in one of the blogs I was reading. But so that sort of like from an aesthetic point of view, I kind of almost regret having sat through all the Star Treks, because there is that sort of continuity that happens between them. That said, I mean, the J.J. Abrams franchise or reboots of Star Trek or look and feel are very different than the older movies, right? The Next Generation movies, or even the first batch of movies, first 6 movies from the original series actors. Yeah, so it's kind of like, it just rolled right in. So I guess from that point of view, it was successful in that it had that same sort of feeling. I was a familiar universe to me. There wasn't really anything sort of out of the ordinary for me. One thing, though, I will have to say, like, when do they invent the universal translator? Because to be honest with you, I don't really enjoy having to read subtitles. I mean, I like, French movies and where they have subtitles, or, Run Lola Run is I think a German movie, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I want to watch it in the original version, but, like the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon's another example. But, if you have the DVD, you can listen to it with the English soundtrack rather than trying to read the subtitles, right? Mm-hmm. So, I didn't really enjoy the Klingon stuff, because again, sometimes the subtitles were a little too fast for me. I had to sort of rewind to go back and see what the guys were actually saying. But that's a lot of work, when I want to just be kick back and watch, some mindless quote unquote air quotes mindless sci-fi. You know what I mean? Like, what did you think about having to read the subtitles as opposed to having the actors slip into English for the sake of science?
I think maybe my perspective is a little bit different, because I've generally preferred to have subtitles for original language reasons. Even when I don't understand what that language is, right? It might be some film in German or Japanese, or, pick your language. Because I feel like the dubs always miss something of the flavor, right? Where, I mean, I understand what that person said, but I kind of got the intent because of the inflections that they had, the pacing that they had. And a lot of the dubbings can be, pretty good nowadays. It's not like before where they were just like comically bad. People spend a lot of time and money on it now, but it's never quite the same. And so, granted, Klingon is not like a real Earth language. And I do know that there is like an actual dictionary and vocabulary and people can learn and study.
I'm sure they were speaking bang on Klingon. I'm sure the Klingonese in this, and like those Canadian voice coaches we talked about before were probably involved in the show. But Klingon sounds a bit like those noises your stomach makes when you're hungry, Right. And this one, it's definitely always been a guttural one, but this interpretation of it was even more guttural. And I kind of hesitate to use the word because it has all sorts of negative racial connotations, but it sounded more tribal rather than Viking style, which I think the next generation Klingons in particular are very sort of Viking sort of thing. They kind of feel like they come from Norse mythology, whereas these folks feel like they come from some sort of, again, more tribal. It could be African. It could be, Native American sort of thing. Like it definitely feels more different, right? It just feels like it has a different flavor to it than the kind of Klingon that was being spoken through the rest of Star Trek. And I think if it was dubbed, you would lose a lot of that because they spent a lot of time and effort on having the pronunciation and the pacing be a little bit different than what we've seen. And in particular for sort of the head of the Klingon group that we see in this first couple episodes, T'Kuvma, his particular voice and role is very, very specific. And it's different from even the other Klingons that are in his group and the other Klingons that we meet. Yeah, that's true. I don't mean to say, to make it sound like it's out of character, but it's just, it's when I watch this in reruns 3 years from now, I'll want to basically not have to look up at the screen to just figure out what they're saying, But yeah, it's interesting. And it's very much like there seem to be a lot more spirituality in this version of Klingons than, to be honest, I was watching, maybe it's Generations. Yeah, it must be Generations where they got the, I've forgotten the names. What's the family that's trying to take over the Klingon Empire with the two sisters? That would be the House of Duras, the Duras sisters. The Duras sisters, right? They're and actually, I hate to say it, Jaime, but I believe one of the Duras sisters is Canadian. But wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, the if not both of them, but one of them is for sure. I've totally forgotten about that subplot where they try and get the phaser codes. I think they tap into Geordi's visor, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd forgotten that whole plot. But like again, those Klingons speak English. Worf speaks English, or sorry, I mean, granted, maybe it's the universal translator working. I'm just sort of doing the air quotes again, right? So it's just odd from that perspective. But yeah, no, it did have a certain flavor to it, much more spiritual. They were talking much more about the sort of honor system that the Klingons have, and almost to the point of prejudice, where there's the one clear, I guess, for lack of a better word, albino Klingon that ends up carrying the torch at the end, right? Mm-hmm. And how the other Klingons look down on him, because they don't want him playing their reindeer games with them, right? That guy Voq, VOQ. Yeah. He kind of gets the double whammy in that not only does he have, from what T'Kuvma describes as like, a genetic defect as far as Klingons are concerned, right? They're very dark skinned and he's pale white kind of skin, but he also has no house, right? So he has no honor to derive from his family in essence. Right. And so I think it says a lot about T'Kuvma's character and Voq's character, right? Who, I guess let's cover this part of the episode. So the basic premise is that T'Kuvma wants to light the light of Kahless. I forget exactly what they call it, but it's this large structure that will send out a beacon to all Klingons. And this matches up with their mythology, where their leader Kahless long ago said, "Hey, when I'm going to Sto-vo-kor, I'm dying. I'm going to their version of heaven. But when I return, look for me here, and you will see this beacon, this star in the sky will occur, and then you'll know that that's me and that's there. I'm there. Go follow me and find me." That's what T'Kuvma is trying to use to his advantage, right? So as the premise that we're given, that the 24 houses
forces of the Klingon empire, such as it is, they're not united. So they're having some sort of internal strife, and he wants to bring them together using outsiders such as the Federation as the foil, as the impetus for, they're a danger to our way of life. We need to band together so that we can make sure we stay who we are, right? And,
right.
And that's
always Klingon, I think it was what the battle cry was.
Right. And I guess as part of this sort of like religious ceremony that T'Kuvma is interested in, they need somebody called the torchbearer to light the torch of this beacon. And the previous one dies due to Michael Burnham's decision to not just do a flyby of this thing where the crew didn't know what it was. They were outside of a sensor range area where they could see it directly because there was some sort of interference going on. And she lands on it, and unfortunately she runs into a Klingon warrior who attacks her. She fights back, and the guy ends up getting killed. And so they need a new torchbearer to take over. And Volk is apparently, for the double whammy reasons of, his genetic defect as well as his lack of a house, is apparently not worthy, except he shows his worthiness by saying, like, I'm worthy because of faith. And he puts his hand over the fire and doesn't flinch or anything, right? And this seems to impress T'Kuvma, be like, oh yeah, you're totally into this religion that I have. Therefore, I welcome you, and you are welcome as part of my extended family, so to speak.
And now that you've burned your hand, you can actually hold on to the torch and deliver it. Yeah. And the second part is when all the Klingons arrive. That's the cliffhanger after the beacon is lit in the first episode, right? And then they go on to have this huge giant battle between, because I think that the Federation crew called the rest of the Federation ships to come out, right, through their normal channels, and the Klingons all answer the beacon, right? That's correct, right?
Roughly, for the major beats. So I had mentioned that they had this thing, they didn't know what it was. Michael Burnham goes out, has the encounter with the Klingon. They end up retrieving her, and we see her with all of these terrible radiation burns because she was only supposed to be out there for a handful of minutes, and she was out there much longer. So they're treating her in sick bay. And when she comes to and she realizes she's been out for a while, she runs up to the bridge and tells him, like, yo, it's Klingons, we need to get the heck out of here, right? She wants to leave. And Captain Georgiou is like, no, like we can't, like, we need to figure out what's going on here, and there are all of these other areas we need to protect in case there's some sort of danger here.
Right, yeah.
We're the only starship, so we'll call Starfleet and say, hey, go send us some backup just in case. But this is where we get into, I think, part of what makes up Michael Burnham, right? Where she clearly has this, this very tragic past related to the Klingons, right? They killed her family, and she was left orphaned and raised by the Vulcans. And so the Klingons, to her, seem to me to be like her white whale for, Moby Dick and Captain Ahab, or her, Captain Picard's interaction with the Borg, after Best of Both Worlds, in subsequent episodes in the series, as well as First Contact, where he just, like, his irrational, like, sort of fear and hatred of them, given, like, how, what he went through. I feel like that same sort of template is shown here with Michael Burnham and her relationship to the Klingons. Yeah,
and so she's got this sort of relationship with Sarek, too. I want to talk about the actor James Frain for a minute, because it's funny because he's shown up as let me get this right, antagonists in a couple of shows I've watched. He's been an antagonist in the series Gotham, and forgetting who he played in that, and he also showed up in Orphan Black for a while, right? And right up to almost to the last episode. I think he's involved in the exit from the show of Mrs. S. But I really haven't really got any warm feelings for this particular actor. I know he's been in a few other shows that I haven't watched, but and so I was disappointed when I saw that he was going to be playing Sarek, because I already have this. It's funny how you get certain actors get into a frame of your frame of mind or frame of reference for them, kind of cast them in a certain light, right? But actually, by the time the two episodes were over, I'm not quite accepting him as Sarek quite yet. He's better than the guy who plays Sarek in the new series, the new J.J. Abrams series. But I think by the end of it, I kind of bought that he was a good guy. He was there to advise Michael Burnham and all that kind of stuff. But I want to ask you, so when she was running onto the bridge and doing all the kind of brash stuff that she does, are we on her side? Did you get that feeling you're on her side, and that everybody else is wrong, they should be listening to her, or did you think the Captain Georgiou had some valid points?
I think.
What do you think about that?
Okay, so at this point, for the first episode, we only get to the point where she says, says, we need to leave. And she is insubordinate with the captain on the bridge in front of the crew, where the captain's like, no, we got to stay here. And she's like, but I'm just trying to save your lives and everybody's lives. And he's like, whoa, you need to chill for a little bit here, right? I think we're meant to see some of that tension, right? We don't fully understand exactly what the situation is with her and the Klingons. We don't fully understand what's going on with T'Kuvma, where we don't know what exactly he's trying to do. All we know is that as far as we can see, a Federation relay station was a probe or something, I forget what they called it, is damaged, and that's what brought out the Senjo to investigate. And it appears to be very intentional, which will come up more in episode 2 here. So far, I think we're kind of meant to be like, well, it could go either way. You know, we could understand that if we were in that situation, we might want to stick around and see what's going on. And as was pointed out, we want to have some sort of diplomatic relations there and potentially protect, the other like star bases and maybe colonies or something that they mentioned. It's later on in the other episode where things get a little crazier, where I think we're meant to sort of think like, I kind of wonder what the right thing to do is here. The title of this episode is called The Vulcan Hello. And at some point, Michael decides to call up Sarek through the like hologram sort of call up and have a heart to heart and be like, hey,
the Vulcan FaceTime,
yeah, Vulcan FaceTime. That's a perfect way of putting it. It's like, how did you all deal with the Klingons? And it's not revealed to us at that point, but he says, well, there's this thing we did, but I don't know if it really applies for your situation. It worked well for the Vulcans. Don't know if it'll work for you. But he tells her anyways, and Michael comes running back to the bridge, tells the captains like, look, this is what we need to do. We need to fire on them. It's like, what do you mean we need to fire on them? No, we're Starfleet. We don't fire first. It's like, well, when the Vulcans first had their interaction with the Klingons, they tried to set up diplomatic relations, and that ship got destroyed. The Klingons didn't respect them. So eventually, every time the Vulcans met with the Klingons, the Vulcans would fire first. And it was eventually figured out that this is something that showed respect for the Klingons, that, hey, we're not going to let you push us around. We're going to shoot on you first. And if you want to talk, that's cool. Otherwise, leave us alone, right? And it's sort of like, like some sort of gang fight sort of thing, or like prison gangs, where it's like, all right, I got to go beat up somebody on day one. Otherwise, people are going to look at me as being weak, right? I need to show that I can hold my own and get the respect.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's sort of what it feels like.
So we move on to the other show, because I know we're kind of... Yeah. I kind of blurred the lines again. I think it kind of implied that I had so much Star Trek that, after watching 18 hours of Star Trek, the last 2 hours were just a blur, in a sense, right? Anyway, but so I mean, and it's like one of those things, like, they play on, writers of stories like this kind of play on our different emotions, and like, when Lucille Ball would get into trouble, or Mary Tyler Moore would get into trouble on the Dick Van Dyke Show, I always feel anxious and like, no, don't do that, that's going to get you in trouble, kind of thing, right? And there was a few moments like that with Michael Burnham's character, right? And maybe that's part of the setup for her, is that, like many of the characters that we see as protagonists in other see, I'm using the right word now, in other versions of Star Trek, Kirk is always sort of going off the cuff, and Riker kind of does too, right? Data gets himself into trouble by installing an emotion chip and things like that, right? And then not being able to deal with the situations that he gets into. But so the second Battle of the Binary Stars, what's the synopsis there? Basically, everybody kind of shows up after the beacon's lit, right? And isn't that where it ends with the Shenzhou being surrounded by a bunch of Klingon warbirds of various shapes and sizes, right?
Yeah, the Klingons have showed up, and I forget exactly where this leads into the second episode, but the Federation shows up as well, and when they do, the Klingons finally allow broadcasting to go through, right? So before they've not answered any hails, but now they let a hail come through, and Captain Georgiou says, hey, we noticed you're in our space. This is Federation space, so you can
Would you like fries with that?
Yeah, it's like, you can either leave because this is our space, or we can start diplomatic relations. We hope it's the latter. And in the meanwhile, right, this is playing in front of T'Kuvma's crew, as well as the other heads of houses who have showed up for the Klingons. And as a little bit of backstory, they've had a little bit of back and forth where there are clearly different opinions within the Klingon houses, where one particular house is very dismissive of T'Kuvma. It's like, who the heck are you? You're not on this council. You're nobody. Who are you to call us here with this like beacon that represents Kalis? And there's another one that says, wait, hold on, I want to see what he has to say. We're going to listen. And a couple others want to pay attention to listen. And this gives T'Kuvma an opportunity to say, hey, hey, there are people who are coming, echoing what he had said at the beginning of the first episode to his own people. It's like, hey, there are people who are coming. They're, a danger to our way of life. We need to unify together as a Klingon empire and protect ourselves. And at the same time here, Captain Jojo is saying like, oh, yada, 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 leave our space, or let's set up diplomatic relations. And Takuma says, okay, here it comes. Here's that phrase that I said before, how they will announce themselves as a danger to us. And she says, we come in peace. He's like, aha, see, this is exactly what I said they were going to do. They were going to say, we come in peace. They're liars. They're a danger to our way of life. And this convinces at least some of the Klingons, and a battle starts, right? The Klingons fire first.
See, that's funny. Just to interject here is that's again with the reading of the texts in the subtitles. I missed that. I wondered why he had said, we come in peace at the very end of his little speech there. But he was saying that this is the trickery that the Federation uses. Is that what he was saying?
Well, I believe he's talking about the Federation in particular in that beginning speech for the very first episode, where he's talking about, the Klingon way of life and the dangers that face it. And he's speaking in Klingon, and it is subtitled for the episode. Mm-hmm. But then he says, they will say, and then he switches to English, we come in peace, in his very sort of preacher, guttural sort of sound that he has to him. And that does happen in the second episode, where Jojo says, we come in peace. And that maps up, like that was perfect, right? Like Takuma has played it perfectly here to bait the Federation into seeing what the heck happened to their probe relay station sort of thing. They've called in reinforcements, so there's, enough, on their side to do battle. And then the Klingons have come, so Takuma's like played everybody in this sort of thing rather well. Like this is set up for what he wanted. He wants battle with the Federation, right?
Yep, and he got it.
Yeah, and they have a pretty cool fight. It's kind of set up. I guess we should backtrack slightly in that the Admiral has arrived, the one that Captain Georgiou has been conversing with through the Vulcan FaceTime mechanism. And the Federation Admiral says like, hey, like we want to have some relations with you, to diplomatic relations with you. And Takuma says, all right, I'll await my envoy. And everything goes wrong. Like they decloak a ship that is like one of those like ice breaking kind of ships is what it looked like to me. Like they would send out into the Arctic to like, it's got this heavy bow that just, crushes ice. In this case, this one starts crushing and bifurcating the Admiral's ship, and the Admiral's ship has like no choice but to self-destruct to try to take it out.
Right. Yeah.
And so everything is just going completely wrong here. The Federation are fighting. The Senjo is like losing, its part. It's like losing power. It's losing engines. It's losing weapons. And so they're like totally hosed in this situation. And I guess that leads on to they're like stuck as what the heck are we going to do? And they end up deciding like, well, if we can capture Takuma, he will like lose his place as, somebody that, can lead these people. And it's very pointedly pointed out, like, we can't kill him because if we kill him, he becomes a martyr and they can fight forever for that martyr. Whereas if we capture him, we can dishonor him and show what a loser he is, and maybe they shouldn't follow him. So they devised this trick because in this particular incarnation, and maybe even particular to Takuma's particular group, they treat the bodies of their dead very differently, where Takuma's ship is covered in coffins of all of the dead Klingons that they've had through their like generational ships. So they're like ornamentation.
Of years, in fact,
yeah. And after some battle, there's some dead, and the Klingons are starting to pull in, through like tractor beams or something. They're recovering their dead's bodies, and they want to put them in coffins. And the Senjo folks decide like, well, what if we were to use the transporter to put a torpedo warhead like really close to one of the bodies, so like when the tractor beam pulls it in, it will pull in the torpedo as well. And they do that to blow up part of Takuma's ship, where it like blows up the neck to separate the bridge section in the head from the rest of the body. Yeah. And they use that as the excuse to like, all right, now we're going to beam over and try to capture him. So there is a little bit of an action sequence that is more, hand-to-hand fighting and a little bit of phaser battling.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I guess at this point, it's worth pointing out that I kind of foresaw something like this happening because it felt like there were spoilers from the title sequence where it's like, oh, special guest star Michelle Yeoh. I was like, oh no.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I was like, oh no. I thought coming into this, considering how much she's been front and center in all of the promotional material and everything. Oh, I thought, well, it's kind of weird that, there's two captains and it's two different ships. Well, maybe something happens between Michael and
right.
Captain Georgiou. And yes, we kind of skipped over the fact that she got Vulcan nerve pinched and there was an attempted mutiny by Michael to try to shoot on the Klingons. I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe that means she's only going to be a recurring sort of guest star, that sometimes when the Senjo and the Discovery come together, they'll see each other, and now they've had this broken relationship where I can't trust you anymore. You tried to take over my ship and you physically assaulted me. But no, it turns out she dies while attempting to battle T'Kuvma, and in retaliation and in irrational anger, rather than stunning T'Kuvma, Michael Burnham switches her phaser to kill and blows a hole right through him, and ultimately ends up escaping as they transport her back, but sadly not Captain Georgiou's body. And everything has just gone terribly. And I think it's around here that we have the time skip to show that there's been a court-martial and Michael Burnham has pled guilty to all charges and was given some sort of like life sentence, I think they said, in prison.
So the show's over. We can all go home now, right?
Yeah. I was like, oh, well, there goes the main character. She's stuck on a penal colony somewhere for the rest of her life.
Exactly, yeah.
Hammering out license plates for the put on the Starship Enterprise and every other Starfleet ship.
Yeah. Have to kick somebody in the knee to escape. So that was kind of odd, because you think that, when you're charged with something, and I mean, she has no proof. She can't go back and get Michelle Yeoh's character because they beamed her off, which as she was going to retrieve the body, right? It was what she was doing. But she was trying to administer some sort of first aid, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. And they beamed her back and threw her in jail. She spends a lot of time in jail in the second episode, right? But just a minor point of inquiry here. I get that, when she had the radiation poisoning from when she was out in episode 1 too long, and they took her to sick bay and they fixed her up and whatever. In the second one, do you know the part where she was to escape from the brig? She has to convince the computer to assist her, and she jumps through open space, and her face starts to freeze and get all scarred up. And then in the next scene, you see her; she's all healed. Like 2 minutes later,
I'll have to watch that sequence. I do remember her getting like the cold sort of frost. I don't remember if she scars though. So maybe it's interpreted to be like, all right, she already had to convince the computer that, hey, if you do this certain sequence of events, one, you'll have to do it because ethical protocols require that, hey, since I'm going to die, since the big chunk of the ship has been blown off and the only thing keeping me alive is the force field keeping in the environment for me, if they can shoot her across into this other doorway, she'll survive. I mean, it probably won't be fun, but she will survive the trip. So I assume we're intended to be like, all right, it probably was like the worst sort of freezing you would ever feel. Like, you're at the research station in Antarctica and you walk out for 5 seconds and you come back, without any of the gear. It probably is like that where, all right, you're going to have to warm up at some point and get rid of the frost and come back to life. I think they kind of skipped over that a little bit.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and watch that part again.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird sort of setup because I mentioned that these first 2 episodes, they kind of feel like a prologue because this is the sort of stuff that would normally be the backstory for a character.
Right. You wouldn't hear about it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You would hear like, oh yeah, this is the premise for this person's character, but we wouldn't actually see what happened. And I reached back to at least the 2 sort of characters that fit the closest in what jumped out immediately at me. One from Star Trek: The Next Generation, that would be Ensign Ro Laren, who was involved in an incident, kicked out of Starfleet, imprisoned, and then brought back on for a special mission. Right? Yep. Same thing with Voyager, where Tom Paris was actually in prison, and we see Captain Janeway going and picking him up again for a special mission. And it kind of feels like that's going to be the setup here, where, funny enough, even though this is called Star Trek Discovery, we never actually get to see the Discovery or its crew in the actual show itself. Like, we see the title sequence, we see the Discovery, as an animated drawing. We don't see the Discovery within the context of this show, which is a little unusual, right? Like, we saw the Star Trek Enterprises, we saw Deep Space Nine, we saw the Voyager. And so this is kind of, I think, intended to be the prologue part that shows us, all right, that's who Michael Burnham is, and that's where we're going to start the show with episode 3. We're introducing the situation that causes her to go from, criminal to to, hey, this captain is bringing this person in for a special region. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
With Jason Isaacs, the guy who can never remember his name, Jason Isaacs.
Right.
Who played Lucas Malfoy and like that. So anyway, and after Trek, so it was interesting. After Trek takes place, I guess, somewhere in LA or something like that. And they had James Frain, who played Sarek, and they had the showrunner, which I've forgotten his name, on the show. And they were talking about this. And he says, he kind of like spoiled it for us, that we are going to see Discovery in the third episode. Because that was the one comment that the host made, was that they didn't show Discovery at all. Like, the show's called Discovery, and like you just said, we didn't see Discovery at all. But then they showed a preview of Michael Burnham meeting some of the crew on the new Discovery, on the Discovery she's going to go to. But interesting as well as after Trek, and I guess this is sort of the some of the fact checking I can do myself now that I know the facts. On the show, they also had the crew of the show, like the filming crew of the show, on the set for this Talking Trek as well, or After Trek, because they had but they were in the space TV studio that you saw Inner Space on a couple of weeks ago, right? They were actually there in Toronto live for this filming. So Sonequa Martin Green and a bunch of other actors who were on the deck with her, on the bridge with her, were also there as well as they watched the show. And so that was interesting. So the fact, and I had mentioned that I thought that they were here for Fan Expo, but they've been here all along, because they're currently filming episodes in Toronto as we speak, right? So they're probably filming right now. So that was interesting. So did you? I want to just can we move on from Star Trek for the rest of the show? We've got a few more minutes left.
Sure.
So quickly though, have you not seen About a Girl episode on the Orville?
Actually, I have.
You put it under your want to see it. Yeah. Because you thought it was going to be on Sunday, right?
I got all confused on the dates because they moved the Orville from Sundays after football to Thursdays. So we got, to their credit, they gave us an extra episode essentially in the same week, Sunday to Thursday, rather than making us wait an entire week and a half to go to the following Thursday.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I had mentioned that I think you and I were talking on Slack that putting it on Thursday kind of puts it in jeopardy, because Thursday night was when Big Bang Theory was on, but Big Bang Theory in for us now is on Monday. I don't know about you, because they just had the season premiere yesterday on today's Wednesday, but I guess on Monday they had the season premiere of Big Bang Theory again just recently. So did you see that yet?
I haven't, and it will be. Well, I guess I'll use my CBS All Access to go watch it now. I don't have the DVR. I'm paying the $6 a month. I might as well go check that out. I don't actually know when a lot of these shows come out, because I generally don't watch live. Like a lot of stuff.
Really? Yeah.
I watch when I want to watch, time shifted.
Right.
Through streaming or maybe binging. That's not possible in the case of either the Orville, which is doing normal broadcasting. It is streaming on the Fox channels. For like Apple TV and Roku and Amazon.
So you don't have cable at all, or you just are you watching?
No, I do, but
for sports, right? Yeah,
I do. But I tend to prefer the streaming because I can just pause, go back. I can watch whenever I want without having to remember to set the DVR to do stuff. It's kind of just there when I find it. In any case, the episode 3 About a Girl is for the Orville is something that I think, gosh, if it doesn't win an Emmy, it should be at least nominated for an Emmy because it really has a morality play that reaches some of the peaks that you might see for something like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where there's cultural differences and you're really not sure what the right answer is. I don't think it's too spoilerific to say that.
Don't say the ending.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the ending, but the Mr. Worf character equivalent, Mr. and Mr. Bortus, he and his husband, because it's the Mocklins are a single sex species. Every one of them are all considered male, except it turns out that their egg has hatched and they have a girl. And the premise is, well, this is a problem. We need to have gender reassignment surgery to change this girl into a male. And it plays through very similar to like a TNG episode, but with, the Orville twist of having drama and a little bit of weirdo comedy. But I think it was handled really, really well, surprisingly well for, when we began a few weeks ago, we thought, I thought Orville was going to be, Peter Griffin, comedy. Family Guy in space. And it's not. It's really more of like a TNG spiritual follow-up. So I recommend people check that out. If you weren't convinced by the first 2 episodes, I'd say at least watch that 3rd episode and see what you you think?
Yeah, but again, there's some odd behavior from the captain, because at one point he just says to them, "Shut the hell up" or whatever, something like that, in very much a Peter Griffin kind of way, but not the kind of thing I would expect a quote unquote Star or Union captain to say. It would be Picard would never say anything like that. Kirk would never say anything like that, right? Unless he was possessed by some strange person, right? So
yeah, I think I would go back to what I'd said either an episode or two ago, that the Orville is TNG, the Next Generation, but if it was blue collar workers. So rather than 6-figure office workers, these are physical laborers of some sort, like construction workers sort of thing, right? Like they come in with their hard hat and their lunch pail. They're not having bourgeois sort of tapas and fusion and avocado toast. Like, no, these people are meat and potatoes, peanut butter and jelly sandwich sort of thing, and it's kind of a job for them, right? It's not a great calling in a federation that has no need for hunger or anything. Everybody's out as being explorers. It's a bunch of crew that a lot of them shouldn't even have the job, right? They got it because of essentially friendliness and nepotism. It's kind of like a Bad News Bears style of group of people put together on this ship, and it makes more sense in that context. You're right. It's not exactly TNG, but it feels like more of the spiritual successor than I would say Discovery does, where Discovery feels more like it follows the same beats and direction and tempo and tone of Star Trek 2009 and the J.J. Abrams films.
Right. Yeah. All right. So you posted here something about the honest trailers. You want to tell us about that? Yeah.
My other pick. So after you go and you have all the feels and all the difficult morality play through as a chaser, to have something a little bit more uplifting, the folks who do honest trailers, which are real funny, insightful looks, making fun, but in an honorable and cherishable sort of way. They make fun of different movies and TV series and video games and stuff. Since this week, as we mentioned, was the 30th anniversary of the premiere of Star Trek The Next Generation, they went ahead and did an honest trailers. It's about 8 minutes of recap of all the craziness that made up Star Trek The Next Generation. Some things that will be like, oh, wow, that was so cool. And other things will be like, yeah, that was kind of dumb. When did that episode happen? That was a bad, that was a bad idea. I can't believe they actually did that. So it's worth to see. It's quite humorous, especially if you were into TNG.
So my pick is I discovered, I think it was on Facebook or something. I can't remember where I was, but I discovered that you can get I should say, stop saying Discovery. You can get Star Trek Discovery lapel pins, and I guess almost like com badges, like the full size ones. So I ordered a couple myself, but and the prices are pretty cheap. It'd be interesting to see what they're like in the U.S., because where they get us Canadians is with the shipping charges, right?
Where are they from? Where's the shipping out of? Los Angeles. Oh, great. Yeah, you're totally. I feel sorry for you, Tim. You probably will get hosed on the
I
got
shipping.
Hosed
like $30 on shipping or whatever. So I was going to order a bunch of them, but I noticed that some of the other ones that they have, like the other Star Trek series and Star Wars, they have some Star Wars paraphernalia as well. So what it is, if you want to get a proper metal comm badge, with magnetic clasps, or even just a lapel pin with the little thing on the back. I mean, $4.95 is a pretty good price, right? So it'd be interesting to see, Jaime, if you can put your address and see what the shipping charge would be for you, because they're using USPS, which for us is always a pain in the butt. You get charged extra for that.
Yeah, I think I might buy one of these. Probably the lapel pin, because I've kind of gotten into that. It seems to be a trend with at least tech conferences. Certainly you and I, completely different topic than here, but we gave a talk at an iOS conference called 360 iDev, and that had lapel pins, enamel pins, which seemed to follow on from what happened at the Worldwide Developer Conference for Apple, where they gave out a whole bunch of really nifty pins. Yeah. They were kind of a collectible thing. So I think I might pick up the, what are they calling here? The Star Trek Discovery Badge lapel pin. So the kind of badge that they had.
$4 or $5 is pretty cheap, right? So yeah, I'm curious, what does it cost to ship to Seattle from LA? Because this is where these people make money, by the way, is on the shipping charges, in my opinion.
Add to cart, checkout. It doesn't even mention. Oh wait, let me put in an address. One sec. Let me see here. Oh, it requires more info. One sec. Okay, enter in info. Fetching available shipping rates. These are insane. Okay, so the cheapest I could possibly get it is by USPS Priority Mail, so that's U.S. Postal Service, for $7.40 shipping.
Well, for me, it was $35, so don't laugh, right?
At $35, I could have it FedEx standard overnight in one business day.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't know what to tell you, Tim. I mean, if you want it sooner, maybe it might be cheaper.
I have no choice. I mean, the cheapest shipping I can use is $35. It goes up from there. Right?
Yeah,
and that's USPS. And the best part about that is when the mailman comes to deliver it to my door, they might charge me duty on it as well.
We can go off show perhaps, but I think I have a couple things we could do that might make more sense. Distributing things within our U.S. friends and then distributing to other folks, given that we have other stuff that we want to send each other.
Yeah.
So
well, I do the same thing with other things that I buy. Right. So It's funny. My shopping cart still showed that I had stuff in it. I don't know why. I know I ordered it and it's supposedly on its way. All right. Well, I guess that's we'll have to wrap it up for this week, and maybe we'll do some after show after the other show after show.
Yeah. So I as opposed to the Orville, where I was sort of a little unsure, and I give my normal caveats that I try to give. 2 episodes. I just throw those away and say, all right, whatever, good or bad. It's the 3rd episode and beyond that I start really judging a show. At the Orville, I felt like, wow, they really nailed it with that 3rd episode because I was a little unsure for the first 2. I'm going to continue to watch the Orville. I feel like Star Trek Discovery nailed it for me in the first 2 episodes, and I definitely want to continue watching.
Yeah. Well, there's only 10 episodes to watch. It's not like you're investing a whole lot in it, right?
Sure, but I am throwing down $5.99 per month for the pleasure of watching Star Trek Discovery with ads, so that it's a little bit different than if it was coming through Netflix, like it is going internationally.
But I'm not watching it on Netflix. I'm watching it on Space. I didn't know if it was on Netflix. I should check, right?
Yeah, here's something to get fact checked. I'm fairly certain I saw some sort of material that said that it costs roughly $8 million per episode for CBS to produce this. And to their great fortune, Netflix is paying $6 million per episode to CBS for the broadcast rights or the distribution rights internationally. So we'll end up seeing what ends up happening with this grand experiment.
Sure. All right, well, let's wrap it up for now. We'll talk to you guys next week. So, hey, Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you on the interwebs, how will they do that?
The best way is on Twitter. I am at Dev with a Hair.
All right, and as I said before, I am Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA on the Twitter machine. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Goodbye.
And see.
If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future. And Blade Runner, which I guess just comes out this Friday. Is that why you have tickets?
It's next Thursday. So yeah, and we bought them well in advance. So
okay, cool.
So by Saturday, if people start buying them on Saturday, they'll probably still be. We're going on Thursday night, the night before it officially opens. So yeah, they do that here. You probably do it there where you guys are too.
So this is like Thursday at midnight or something.
Yeah, it's like they're actually showing like a 7 and a 9 o'clock kind of show, and then they used to just do like the midnight one. Yeah, but now they slide it back. I think they figured they can make more money, right? If they just let us see it early, right?
Yeah.
All the diehards go. Yeah.
Opening ticket sales for the weekend, which if you start the weekend on like Monday and go into the next Sunday, it does better that way. I know their tricks.
You can make more money and sell lots of large popcorn too, right? Mm-hmm. All right, which is a famous analogy of mine. All right, so do you ever watch there's a show called Brain Games, I think it's called, on National Geographic, and they told the story about the large popcorn, which is where I get that analogy about how it tricks your brain into, irrationally buying the large popcorn every time, so.
I've not seen what you're talking about, but I am familiar with the example, and it does affect my choices when I go there. Like, I tend to choose the medium because that's about the right amount where I can eat most of it by myself and a little bit, with somebody else helping.
Yeah, but it's only 50 cents more for the large, right? That's the rush. That's how they get you. So if you look at where they price the small bag of popcorn, it's usually like, let's say it's like $2 or $3 for the small popcorn, and they'll make it like $5 for the large popcorn, and they'll make the medium one. They won't make the medium one the median between the large and the small. They'll make the medium one just slightly cheaper than the large one, right? Yeah. So the rationale is, so they'll make it $4.50, and you'll look at it and go, well, it's only $5 for the large. Let's get the large, right?
Yeah,
that works 60% of the time with people.
Yeah, for me, I've gone with, all right, every time I've gotten the large, it's tricky because I might end up consuming too much of it. Like, unless it's a meal replacement, like, oh, we didn't have time to go to dinner before the movie, so this is kind of my meal.
Well, it's a healthy snack, but it's not a nutritional meal.
It still fills your belly though, so you can make it through the movie. The large ends up being just a little bit too much for just me.
But they throw so much salt on there that you have to get the big gulp drink too, right, to quench your thirst,
to hydrate a little bit, so you don't get get desiccated by all the amount of salt they have in there.
Salt, exactly. Yeah, and then they have those big giant rubber hot dogs, and do they have the nacho chips with the really bad cheese that you can get?
Yeah,
do they have that in your theaters?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Where it's like a bag of Tostitos, probably the Tostitos rounds,
and they're not even Tostito quality; they're like lower.
Yeah, and then the like Velveeta in a cup, that like a yogurt cup. I really dislike those, and I definitely appreciate Velveeta when they have the we bring out the chips and we put them in a little like a paper bowl, and then we pour over the melted cheese. And even if it's Velveeta there, at least it's melted cheese, not slightly warm cheese yogurt.
So
cup.
Velveeta is that sort of lava like cheese stuff that's the Velveeta. Like you know what Cheese Whiz is? Do you have Cheese Whiz down there?
Yeah, we have that brand. I don't know the similarities between them, and the thing I'm thinking of is like it comes in these big cans. It's probably not Velveeta because it's not Velveeta brand.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like these big cans, and like you see them at Costco or Sam's Club, like any of the wholesalers.
Right.
And I remember the emblem is some sort of like a liquid drop. Like it's like a melted cheese drop kind of emblem or character or something. Well, I'll see if I can find it.
But it's like that consistency of like it's sort of cheesy, liquidy cheese. Like if you tipped it would pour out, and it probably never solidifies. Is that the kind of cheese you get there?
It doesn't become fully solid.
It would. No.
It kind of like crusts over, and it's more like dry ketchup than anything. It doesn't become fully solid. It probably contains no cheese whatsoever. It's like cheese product or flavor or something.
Yeah, yeah, and they charge you like $7 for this experience, and we're happy to pay it.
Yeah, that's why you need to always get the jalapenos, because at least you got a little bit of like fruits and vegetables in there.
Don't you mean jalapenos?
Jalapenos,
right? Yeah. No, it's funny when we go to the. I always try to eat healthy when I go to the theater, and like I'll get like the buffalo chicken wrap, which is like day old lettuce and soggy tomatoes with buffalo just a deep fried chicken in a wrap, right? So it's way more healthier than the other stuff. But I usually default to the big rubber hot dog thing, with the squish of ketchup and some relish and mustard, and Jonathan always gets the popcorn. Jonathan, our fact checker, always gets the popcorn, and he usually gets the large, and then I usually scam a couple of handfuls off him halfway through the movie. So.
Today, we discuss Miro. Listen, when it comes to running client workshops, the dream, of course, is to get those creative juices flowing, right? But typically what ends up happening is thousands of hours get wasted because of poorly facilitated meetings. So I have Maya with me today. She's a consultant who runs Fortune 100 workshops, from leadership training to team building, and she has the insider tip on what makes things work. Maya?
Thank you, Jason. I've been doing this a long time. My number one tip is to bring everyone into that visual collaboration platform. So personally, I use Miro Miro, and it's completely changed how I interact with the room. You have to give people a way to feel like they're in the room even when they're not. That's something you can do easily in Miro. Otherwise, they've seen the same slides and format 1,000 times.
Falling asleep, eyes glazing over, yawns, all that.
Exactly. When people follow me on the Miro board, everyone is literally going on a journey with me. We're adding thoughts, we're reacting, and we're voting for the best ideas. It's great.
Connective magic. I like it. That's Miro.com.